Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where you meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothenburg. Welcome to the 39th episode of the Shipping Podcast. Still celebrating, this is the first episode on the second year of the Shipping Podcast. Thank you for listening. Have you heard about the Trident Alliance? Do you know what that is? Well, we need to go back to the sulfur emission control areas, sea areas in which stricter controls were established to minimize airborne emissions from ships. These regulations stemmed from concerns about the shipping industry contributing to local and global air pollution. There was a lot of discussions prior to these control areas being introduced. The shipping industry protesting, looking for a level playing field, that is global regulations. But the politicians thought otherwise and decided to go for separate control areas. An international protocol was signed and the new regulations came into force. But it's the individual nations, the governments, who are in charge of imposing enforcement and penalty on those who doesn't comply with the new regulations. Does it sound complicated? Well, in this episode, you're going to meet the chair of the Trident Alliance. Her name is Anna Larsson. She's the Vice President and Global Head of Sustainability at Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics in Oslo. Anna came to Gothenburg on the 17th of February this year to deliver a keynote speech at a shipping conference. And I took the opportunity to sit down with her and talk to her about what is the Trident Alliance and what do you do. The short answer to that is it's about 35 shipping companies working together for enforcement of the sulfur regulations. But I'm sure you will be much wiser after having listened to Anna Larsson in this episode of the Shipping Podcast. Please enjoy. Anna Larsson, welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Lena. So my name is Anna Larsson. I'm Swedish. I've been working for Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics now for almost 8 years. My role currently is that I'm Vice President Sustainability for the global company.
And what is your background?
Well, I've studied from the beginning really business and then realizing that I'm not really into economics. After working a little bit, I went back to school and studied journalism. And then of course, the combination of business and journalism resulted in me going into communications and corporate communications, and actually spent my first 14 years in the chemicals and coatings industry, working for Swedish Nobel Industries and then AkzoNobel in different places in Sweden and in the Netherlands. Started working for Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics then as my first shipping company. And only shipping company so far.
So how did that come about? Did you just step on that famous banana leaf, or?
Well, I was actually looking. I'd been for almost 14 years in the same company, and was hitting 40, and figured that if I was going to change my life and do something different, this was the time. And I'd heard a lot of good things about Wallenius Wilhelmsen, so when the opportunity came up, I took the chance.
Mm. And you're also in charge of the Trident Alliance nowadays.
Yes, a very, very
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So what is Trident Alliance?
So the Trident Alliance is really an industry grouping, like an industry NGO, you can say, that's working for the robust enforcement of sulfur regulations. It's a group of companies who understand the necessity and the reason behind sulfur regulations, but we want to make sure that everybody actually follows them. So to do that, what we saw, the companies who joined the Trident Alliance, were rather surprised that we didn't really see the authorities talking a lot about enforcement when the new regulations came into place. And rather concerned considering the huge cost that these regulations entail. And that means that there's a big temptation to cheat.
So why do you think authorities didn't talk about it?
I'm not sure. I think there's been the sulfur regulations have a completely different impact on shipping than any previous regulations or any other regulations that they have been working with. So if you look at the NOx regulations, if you look at the ballast water regulations, they all mean that you need to invest in your next generation of vessels or in your current vessels in a system that you install and then operate. So it's quite easy to verify, and there's no reason not to operate the system once you have it installed. So it's a one-time cost in many ways, and it's not something that most companies can't actually handle. When it comes to sulfur regulations, it's very different. And sulfur regulations, the most common way of complying is that you use marine gas oil instead of fuel of bunker, of heavy fuel oil. And that is a rather big change when it comes to cost. It's operationally a difference. There's a process that you need to follow to make sure that it's safe. But the price difference between bunker and MGO is about 50%. So it's a big additional cost. We're talking for a larger vessel, there's a cost of around $12,500 per day, an increased cost of $12,500 per day for using this low sulfur fuel instead of the bunker fuel. So of course there is a temptation there, but I don't think that there was an understanding maybe among the authorities of the size of the impact of the legislation.
But it's also, as we spoke about yesterday, an international regulation, which national authorities should follow up on.
Yes. So the way it works is that it's an IMO decision, and then national European nations, for example, and all the countries within Europe have to then transpose this international law to start with, and then they have to enforce it. And I think maybe everybody wasn't really aware of the big job that it would be.
But still, they voted for it within the international body.
True.
Which companies are within the Triton Alliance? Are there only RoRo as Wallenius?
No. We're a big mix of companies. We've got about 35 companies today. To name some big names, Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, Crowley, DFDS, Unifeeder. Yeah, there's a whole list. USCC. It's mostly today European. We have some American members. We have also some Asian members. But the main focus has really now been to start with on the European regulations, the ECA zones that came into place, or the SECAs really for Europe, that came into place in January 2015. And that's why we've been focusing on this.
And also the North American region, where they also have this.
They do. There's a few things that have to be in place for enforcement to work. And of course, you've got to have the legal framework in place so that that's clear. And you have to, for example, for Europe, that all the nations actually have transposed the text, this into their national law. You also need to have sanctions that are really dissuasive, that really hurt. And I think we see less of an enforcement problem maybe in the US because the sanctions there are pretty severe. And everybody knows that if you get caught, it's going to really hurt.
So is there a difference between the European countries, how they look upon these sanctions?
Well, we've actually done a complete mapping. Trident Alliance had actually called around and talked to all the different nations involved and checked what the sanction scheme looked like. And they're not very dissuasive. And unfortunately, I mean, one language that's often used is that it's supposed to negate whatever financial gain you've made. So that basically means if you have a very small chance of being checked in the first place, and when you get caught, you then only have to forfeit basically what you've gained from that one infringement. Even if you put a little bit of sort of additional penalty on top of that, it's not going to scare many shipping companies. Unfortunately, we also see that some of the legal setups are very unclear still. Unfortunately, Sweden is one example where we've understood that there have been infringements, they have been caught, but there's no possibility to actually bring these cases into proper handling in court because there's They just don't have the processes in place, and it's too complicated. It takes too long. So fortunately now I think the authorities, the relevant authorities, have actually asked for this to be changed so that the authorities placed with the enforcement agency to be able to levy a fine more directly. And then you get something that has a bit more teeth.
Because going back to why we have all this new legislation, it's because people live close to the sea and we are not supposed to be exposed to this sulfur and so on.
Yeah,
but
that's why the enforcement is so important. I mean, there's what we see. For us, there's 3 reasons why we work for robust enforcement. One, of course, there's self-interest there. It's about having a level playing field. If we are facing competitors who can run around unpunished and having a 50% lower operational cost than we have a problem. Second, as you said, we won't get the proper benefit. These are important regulation because sulfur is dangerous for people. We know that. They need to actually be functioning. And if we don't have robust enforcement, we don't know that we actually get the effect that we would need. And of course, the third, which is also very important, is that if we don't have robust enforcement, there won't be any investments in new technology, and entrepreneurs actually have the solutions to finding efficient ways of reducing sulfur and reducing emissions, because there won't be a perceived marketplace. Investors will see that, okay, instead of being, every vessel needs to have that, there's possibilities to get out of it without actually having a solution.
And how do you actually measure who is the bad guys and who is the good guys?
Well, today enforcement happens in that mostly what's being done is that the port state control goes aboard vessels and looks at the bunker delivery notes and looks at the logbook to see if fuel switching has been taken place, if the vessel has the right fuels on board with the right sulfur level, and so on. And in some cases, if there are suspicions or because there's a need for a random sample, they take a fuel sample to check this. Unfortunately, the first check, the actual paper check of bunker delivery notes and logs, we're talking a paper trail that's not really standardized. It's not, in many cases, it's not a digital system. It still can be very paper-based. And it's not that hard to fake or falsify. And unfortunately, within shipping, fake bunker delivery notes is not unheard of. So that's a big problem.
And then what about if you have got scrubbers installed?
Yeah.
For say?
So if you have scrubbers installed, that's a different way of meeting the requirements. When we actually operate a few vessels with scrubbers. And what you do then is that you have in-stack emission sensors. So you have sensors that measure the sulfur level and level of other substances in the actual emissions going out of the funnel. That's not uncomplicated either. It's hard to get good sensor technology that really works and that's reliable at sea. There's a lot of experience with continuous monitoring on land that works well. But if you put a sensor in the top of a vessel stack with the vibrations, the temperature differences, the humidity, the salt, it's a lot trickier. But then you have that log to show.
But what about I've heard about the sniffers on land.
Yeah, yes, true. That happens as well. And that's the kind of enforcement technology that we need to see more of.
So what is a sniffer?
The sniffer is really the same kind of sensor. So it sits somewhere, either stationary or it can be moving. And it measures the sulfur content in the fumes coming out of the smokestack, so that you actually check it that way. There are some stationary sniffers that are known, the Great Belt Bridge, for example, and also outside on the islands outside of Denmark. But the most interesting we find is the measurements that have been made using mobile sensors on helicopters or planes or drones, because then you can actually check what's happening at sea. Because if you take, for example, I use the analogy of the traffic cameras. We all kind of know how we tend to behave. If you know the traffic camera is there, you make sure that you're driving the right speed. You're a lot more careful. In port, this is where, if there's any checks, that's where you will be checked. So you will make sure that you have the right fuel in port. However, What we don't know currently, because there are so few mobile sensors in place, is what actually happens going in and out of the ECAs at sea. Are vessels really switching over at the right time? Or are they risking it and taking longer when they're going into ECAs because they know that there's actually no monitoring happening at sea?
And who is gathering all the information? Is that the national authorities, or is there anything going on within the European system or in the IMO system?
National authorities today are gathering information on what's happening in their ports, basically, and in some cases from stationary sensors. There is information sharing. EMSA, who administrate the enforcement, so to speak, from the European Commission side, have in place a system called THETIS, S, and the S is basically the sulphur part where they added to this data sharing system. And that's come into place this year. I think it's an important tool, and I hope that it's being used fully to share information about which vessels maybe need to be checked further and which vessels where they have infringements.
I think it's interesting because we are trying to do something, and we, as an industry, we are trying to become more green and brushing up on our reputation and our brand as an industry. You are doing your part, but we need some help from the authorities and from everyone else as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. We've been working really from the start. It was all about just getting some attention on the fact that this really needs to be enforced. It's not a regulation that you can just put out there and hope that it's gonna, everyone will just follow.
Have you been successful in your job?
I think we have. When we started talking about this, really, summer of 2014, there was no one talking about sulfur enforcement. There was a lot of fuss around, everybody's going to be shifting from sea to land, and there was a lot of fuss about it being costly and just difficult. But nobody was actually discussing the enforcement aspect. And since my predecessor, Roger, I think did an amazing job in his time, just getting this question on the table and out in the media and to be discussed. And I think we've really been successful there. And we've also been invited on several occasions to be the industry representative in discussions between the different enforcement authorities, in conferences, and to give the industry perspective on this. It's something that we need to keep working on, though. We are not at all where we need to be. You get, as I said, you're getting compliance levels of, or let's say non-compliance levels being measured and reported from European ports somewhere between 2% up to 9%, which is A, not good enough because everybody should know where this is. And B, still just the measurements in port. We don't know what's actually happening at sea. And I think that's the crucial part right now.
And what will happen in 2020?
That's the tough part.
With the global
cap. Global cap, yeah. Then enforcement becomes an even bigger issue. I was talking about the different things that need to be in place for enforcement to work, and there's 4 things I would say that need to be in place. First of all, you need to have a very clear legal framework where it's clear who is responsible for enforcement, who will be which jurisdictions will be in charge of any sanctions, which legal system needs to take care of this. Then you have to have dissuasive sanctions. Then you have to have detection technology that actually can find any culprits and measure how implementation is working. And then you need to have the resources from the port state control side or from whoever is responsible for enforcing to actually be doing the job. And with the global cap, we're in trouble already with the first one. It's very unclear around jurisdictions and who has jurisdiction over the high seas. The IMO make the regulations, but they have no enforcement arm, so to speak. And can we really, back to the resource side, expect the national authorities, will the US Coast Guard, will the French go out and enforce in international waters? Probably not.
But who's got the thinking cap on this one? Do you know? I mean, is it IMO? Are they thinking about this? Or who has got that ball right now?
We're doing quite a lot of thinking, and we're also working with other organizations who are helping us with that thinking. As the Trident Alliance, we can call attention to this. But it is in the end the authorities who need to regulate and make sure that things are enforceable. One of the partners we're working with now is IBIA, who have a vote in the and play a say in the IMO, and we have members across Europe in many different countries, and they are also talking to their national shipping associations to voice their concerns and get those shipping associations to think and act on the problem.
So are there any national ship owners associations who are not on the flow of the Trident? I mean, it must be politically correct to say, yes, all our members are sustainable and they are thinking for the future.
I mean, as you were mentioned before, that the shipping industry is trying to brush up on its image and want to be greener. And that is completely the case. So our message has not been that popular with all ship owners associations, because basically what we're saying is that it's like, guys, you're implying that there will be cheaters out there, which doesn't look good. But unfortunately, looking at the financial incentives at play here, and when you come to the global cap, they're going to be even larger. We're talking even higher costs. We have to be realistic. We cannot just sit and think that everyone's going to play nice.
I read about the name Trident on your website. Talk a little bit about the symbol of the power of Poseidon.
Yeah.
Why do you know why you chose that symbol?
I know, because that was basically a brainstorm between Roger and me. Yeah, there are really a couple of different things that came into the Trident allegory. Of course, Poseidon is a strong maritime power, and we think the strength in unity between all the companies in the Trident Alliance is a good symbol for that. But it's also the fact that in this case, when it comes to enforcing sulfur regulations, the interests of responsible industry, the environment, and coastal communities are completely aligned. We're looking for the same thing here. And for us, therefore, it's something that we should be working together on. And that's why we chose this symbol.
I thought it was interesting to know why. And you're also talking about sort of a responsible
industry. I mean, that's part of, it's maybe a bit pretentious, but at least all the members of the Trident Alliance have signed, all the CEOs of all the companies that are members of the Trident Alliance have signed declarations saying that they will comply with all sulfur regulations at all times. So that's an important part. To be a member, you have to declare that you will, without doubt, follow the sulfur rules, and in addition that you will be working for the robust enforcement of sulfur regulations. So that means that you will be supporting anything that goes on and helping to further the interests of the Alliance. We're a very lean and mean operation. There are no fees for joining. Everybody basically needs to work together to get where we need to come.
Good luck with that. If we talk a little bit about your work at Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics.
Yeah.
What is your responsibility? What do you do every day?
Oh, well, I'm responsible for sustainability, which in our case, environment is a huge part of that. Also being, let's say, we have a concept that we call responsible logistics, and acting as a responsible company in the communities that we live in, and towards our employers, and towards the next generation. That's really what it's all about.
And how do you do that in a shipping company?
Well, I mean, my role is very much to be setting policies, setting direction, aligning with owners, shareholders, our company management on what position we want to take, where we want to be, and then working very, very closely with the line organization, be it the ocean operations side or the inland transport side, or all our technical services, vehicle services and processing centers, to make sure that we're living up to those policies, and that we can also report back and follow up that we really are living up to our commitments. Transparency is a very important one. Where we've been working for a long time is on the environmental side. We have been issuing sort of public environmental reports, sustainability reports, since the early 2000s. We've been reporting third-party verified greenhouse gas reports since 2008. And so transparency is a very important part of that. And I mean, being an actor that has, in my role, I'm fortunate enough to have owners who have actually stated in the founding papers of our company that we're supposed to be driving environmental development in our industry. So I have a big mandate to actually be doing things like working with the Trident Alliance, working with our owners to find new ways of reducing emissions and limiting our impact on the environment.
Have your job changed are you doing different things now than you did when you started?
Oh, yes. I mean, I really started in WWL in the corporate communications side and corporate affairs. So doing a little bit of environmental and sustainability work at that time. And then I've really been working within external communications, marketing, working very closely on the environmental reporting and environmental follow-up with our environmental side, but it hasn't been my main responsibility until actually this autumn.
Yeah, but I thought my question was based on, are there different focus areas now than 5
before.
years ago?
Ah, yes, in our environmental work, in our sustainability work. I think there's... if you do a materiality analysis, which is really where you start with in environmental work, where is our biggest impact and where can we make the biggest difference? What should we be working on? It really is about the vessels. It's CO2, it's sulfur, it's NOx, it's ballast water, of course, or alien invasive species, which today is both ballast water but also has to do with hull fouling. And there's marine safety. Whales and acting in a responsible way when at sea. So I think those areas have been the same for a long time. There's, I guess, the focus and the effort being spent on each and every one kind of varies a little bit depending on what's happening in the environment. And that's then maybe more the legislative environment than the actual physical environment. There's been a lot of focus, of course, on sulfur over the past few years. There's also now we do quite a lot of work working in the development of regulations as well, and trying to influence and make sure that it's set up in a way that is easy to enforce and can work properly, can be implemented properly. So quite a lot of work right now goes into the CO2 area, and the European MRV legislation coming up, and the IMO work around measurement, reporting, and verification.
Yeah, I understand that is the lesson that the shipping community has learned, that it's better to become part of the process and come early in the process of new regulations coming up. Yeah. Otherwise, you sit there and it's all done deal, and then you just have to live up to it.
Absolutely. And it's an interesting point. There's been a lot of discussion around the COP21 and shipping being, in this case, not included, and whether that was a good thing or a bad thing.
What is your view on that?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of a missed opportunity, but at the same time, I think the whole discussion in itself, the fact that it was raised, has really put a lot of pressure on the shipping community and its organizations, on the IMO and on others. And I think it's, for us, I mean, the way we see it is we want good, solid legislation that doesn't take too long to implement or put into place. And that's clear. And that's also done on a global level. We're global shippers. If we have to face different sulfur limits in Australia, in China, it can get quite complicated. Better to have global regulations that are clear. But what we see, unfortunately, is that if the perception of the outside world is that we're lagging behind, then everyone starts stepping in and wanting to put in their own legislation, be it nation states or be it, like the other week, the IMF, who had this brilliant idea of taxing both shipping and aviation to raise money for the climate fund.
Yeah, so better to be...
Better to take charge and move ahead.
How do you see the future of shipping?
Good question. I think it will be very, very interesting. There is a lot happening on the environmental front. And with the increased legislation, with the increased digitization as well, I mean, information sharing for us, we're very much part of an integrated network. We've never really been just a shipping company. We are an integrated logistics company. So for us, information flow across sea, land, processing, integrating with our customer systems, that is something that we're already doing, basically. And that will yield, I think, in the coming years, a lot of opportunities once we really learn to harness and work with that data. On the environmental side, I think we will see huge developments. There are limits, I guess, to how far we can get with the existing energy sources that we have. But the pace of development right now when it comes to alternative energy sources, new options, is relatively fast. And there's been some step changes, and I think we can see some step changes in technology that can open up some really interesting opportunities for the shipping industry.
We are dependent on technology developments all over the place, but also I think that all these new regulations have sort of made the box bigger, people or smaller, so people are thinking outside the box. Because I've never seen so much innovation for a very long time that I see now, both in alternative fuels and in other things happening on board and on shore.
Yeah.
No, do you agree?
I agree completely. And we do need the outside influence. I think that is really important. We've been working as WWL, we've been working for a long time with the ORCELLE Award, working with an outside foundation, the Ocean Exchange, around this award, which is $100,000 to an environmental entrepreneur every year. And we get every year around, the past few years, between 70, 80 candidates. And these are fairly advanced. These are solutions that need to be on the prototype stage. And we get so many interesting ideas and such good input from that we can actually then put into our own operations. I mean, a good example, we have currently, since I think a year back now, an installation from one of the winner a couple of years ago, called Echo Subsea. It's basically a clean and capture system which enables us to. It's a remote controlled unit operating with water pressure that basically can clean the hulls of our vessels and collect the fouling for recycling or burning or fertilizing or whatever they use it for. And we can actually do this while we're working the vessel. So it's a really quite revolutionary innovation in an area that has been very traditionally handled by, divers with steel brushers, which is both a dangerous job that you really don't want to have people doing unnecessarily, and also something that you then couldn't really do when you were working the ship. And also it did, the problem of releasing organisms on the vessel. But with this system, we both save the environment from any fouling. We do it in a way that's cost effective for us. And it also means that we can clean our vessels more often, which means that we operate more efficiently. There's less drag and we use less fuel, so release less CO2.
I think that all the innovation going on in our industry right now, we are going to need some skills that we don't have today.
Yes. Yeah.
We're going to need new skills. Where will that come from? And what are those skills? And for me, that will mean that it won't be a gender issue anymore. In a way, because nowadays most ship owners are recruiting people who has been at sea. And there are definitely a majority of men. Yeah. So there are not that many women within our industry. I know that the engineering, the technical jobs do not attract women either. But I think that is changing.
Yeah, to a much bigger degree, I would say. It's interesting because from my background was in the chemical industry and coatings industry, and that was also an area where you traditionally had really only men because women weren't really allowed to work in the factories because of the health issues, basically. But today, if you look at the universities, you've got a majority of women studying chemical engineering. So that has changed a lot. I mean, it started changing already when I was in the business. I think the situation has been the same. It's the same kind of historical background where going at sea and being away for, 6 months at a time or a year at a time as it wasn't particularly attractive for women who were supposed to be taking care of the families. And that has changed today. The working conditions on a vessel are not the same. You're still out for a long time, but you're starting to see more women on board. We have female captains. And the new environment, as you say, with the more sort of high-tech, more qualified kind of positions, I think should fix the gender equality a little bit.
Yeah, I think we are such a cool industry, but we're not telling anyone.
True. We need to reach out.
Yeah, that is the next question. We're usually looked upon as the hidden industry or the secret of the world in a way.
Quite. Yeah.
How do we change that?
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of changed a little bit during COP because it became more of a question that was actually discussed in news media, in general news media. Unfortunately, that means that shipping is then known more for either vessel accidents, incidents, or environmental bad guys. And I think to change it, what we need to do is really to make sure that we can show what we're doing and how it contributes to people's everyday lives. The IMO is doing some work on that. And I think it's mostly important for when it comes to recruiting and reaching out to schools and to young people. I don't know if it's necessarily so that every man, woman, and child in the world needs to know everything about how their products get to them. But I think especially when it comes to students, then it's really important.
But what you're doing with the Trident Alliance, I also think that is one. But your target audience there is authorities. It's not the general public.
Not so much the general public, no. It's the authorities. They're the ones who can make a difference. And those are the stakeholders that we need to discuss to start with. And of course, the shipping industry. We can be pretty good at keeping eyes on each other. And it's interesting that the discussion has also brought up some very laudable transparency initiatives. I mean, I know DFDS, one of our members, they will be publishing their sulfur emission data on their website at some time going forward in not too long a future.
As land-based companies do.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the automotive industry and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah, with your background you are a communications person. So that is also part of this. How do we get more? I think that we need more attention to our industry. Because the more attention we get to show up the good sides, the green sides, the cool industry and so on, that will help to build a reputation.
Yeah.
But not everyone is willing to do that. No. So there is sort of going backwards and forwards. I think it's.
I guess I would invite. I think as you say, it is a cool industry, and the vessels are so cool. But they're at sea, and they're usually far out. They're supposed to spend most of their time far away from land, and people don't see them. And I think one thing that shipping companies could do to really sort of increase interest and understanding is to actually organize more open days. Invite families, invite communities to go on board vessels when they're at port and actually show what they're doing and how it works. I think that would be more of that, I think would have a good contribution.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from Gothenburg. We are in Gothenburg. And every time there has been one of these very, very large container vessels here, people are queuing for days. Tickets are sold out in 5 minutes and everyone wants to see it. Yeah. And that is, I find that very cool because when I speak to people, I work in the shipping industry and they say, is there a shipping industry? And then we've had 3 calls lately and everyone wants to go and see them. Even my brother called me to say, I want to go and see that. Should I come and pick you up? Yeah. And I thought, you? My brother is never interested in shipping at all. No. He's into something completely different. And he doesn't understand what I'm talking about. And he called me to ask, do you want to come with me to the port?
But that's good. And I'm really happy to hear that there are shipping companies who do that. I think it's brilliant.
I think it's also the port of Gothenburg in connection with both Maersk and with CMAC.
Yeah. That's excellent.
That's a way to do it. But also I think, like the small community on Donsö outside Gothenburg.
Yes. Yeah.
when they have a new delivery, they take the vessel there and all the small children go on board. And that, of course, makes a difference for someone who has, as a child, experienced the ship and probably feel the love to the ship from their parents. I attended a delivery of an ambulance vessel the other day. There's 700 people out there to greet and to see it and so on.
And there, I mean, in a community like that, an island community, of course, then vessels are core. It's the lifeline.
Yeah,
they couldn't live there without vessels. So there it's huge.
Yeah,
but in a way, you know, we're all on islands somehow, and we need shipping. We need vessels to connect, to get goods, to get services.
Did you ever have a role model?
I think I've had many role models. And I guess like most people, you start with your parents. And I think both my father and my mother have been very important role models for me in the way they have been as parents and as people in social circles, at work. For me, there are a few things that are really important and that I have from that, and that I guess that I've seen also in some of my other role models: integrity, loyalty, and honesty. I think those are for me 3 very, very important things.
Do you view yourself as a role model today for younger people in our industry?
I haven't actually thought about that, but I guess now in the role I have now, would be great if I would be. It's a role where I'm out quite a lot. I speak at a lot of conferences. I'm out in the company a lot, and I know that environment for us is one of the most engaging and one of the most important things for our employees. We see that in our staff surveys. One of the big reasons people want to work for us, and one of the big reasons that they stay working for us, is really our attitude and our way of working with environmental responsibility.
If you were listening to the Shipping Podcast, who do you think I should interview the next time?
The new head of the IMO.
Okay, I'll see what I can do. Thank you very much, Anna, for being a guest at the Shipping Podcast.
Thank you, Lena.
Anna is referring to the ORCELLE. That was a concept vessel drawn and built as a model in 2005. I will put a link to it within the show notes and you can have a look. We are not far away from that now, 10 years later. So who knows what will happen in the 10 years to come. After my meeting with Anna, I decided to go and meet the father of the sniffer. He is a professor at the Earth and Space Science Department of Chalmers here in Gothenburg. I have made a separate episode with him, and you will be able to listen to that later on during this autumn. I have celebrated the 1-year anniversary. Thank you everyone that sent me emails and shout-outs on Twitter and Facebook. It really warms my heart. I love you back. I think this is so much fun. And the best thing I know is actually to get your feedback. So don't hesitate to call me or contact me in any other way you want. I just appreciate that. Until the next time, over and out, and take care. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. You can sign up for a monthly newsletter by visiting the website shippingpodcast.com and look for the button "I'm also a shipping podcast lover."